Hold the meeting. Thanks, Will.
Mhm.
Okay. It is 2 o'clock and I am calling the meeting to order. We do have a forum. Bob McCauley, Dan Taylor, Craig Durgan, Seb Eggert, and myself. That's 5 of us here. And currently we are only 7. We have 2 openings right now. So that will get us a quorum here. Per the governor's extended proclamation 2028 and in response to the COVID-19 pandemic, Jefferson County PUD is no longer providing an in-person room for meetings of the BOC. All meetings will be held remotely via Zoom. Participants' audio will be muted upon entry. Please unmute at the appropriate time to speak. If you are calling in, use *6 to mute and unmute and *9 to raise a hand to request to speak. So I am moving on to introductions here, and I've pretty much introduced the cab. Cammie Brown is also here, and Will O'Donnell. Commissioner Randall is here with us today, and Kevin Street. Is there anybody else from staff? Oh, Don McDaniel is here, of course. And that looks like everybody that I can see here. So with that, I'll move on to an agenda approval. Has everyone had an opportunity to look at the agenda, and are there any additions or changes that need to be made to the agenda? Okay, I'm seeing none, hearing none, not seeing any hands up. All righty. I would entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved by Seb.
Okay, Seb moved to approve the agenda. Will someone second, please?
Second,
And who was that that seconded?
Bob McCauley.
Okay, thanks, Bob.
Thank you, Bob.
Okay, so it's been moved by Seb Eggert and seconded by Bob McCauley to approve the agenda as is. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, the agenda is approved as written. Now we move on to public comment. I don't see anybody here from the public, but I will go ahead and read this just as a matter of form. This public comment period of up to 15 minutes is for any items not on the agenda. During the meeting, the chair may also permit public comments on other discussion items. Each speaker is limited to 3 minutes. Will, has anybody come in? Nope, I don't see anybody. So not seeing anybody here from the public to comment, we will move on to the minutes. And my understanding is that there are folks that had difficulty pulling up the minutes. I could pull them up originally, but then earlier today when I went to pull them up, I could not access them. And Cammie said that they were having a problem with this in IT. Cammie, could you tell us about that a little bit, please?
I can tell you a little bit.
Okay,
They're working the problem with Microsoft. Evidently, if you have an account in your offsite, it's hard to download the documents or access them. So I guess they're working the problem, and as soon as they resolve it, they'll let us know.
okay, thanks for that. So given that there are some of us that could pull up the minutes and some of us who could not, I would entertain a motion to table the minutes to the next meeting, and hopefully at that point in time, we will all have had an opportunity to access them.
So moved.
Okay, and that motion was made by
Dan,
Dan
I'll
Taylor,
second it.
seconded by Craig Durgan. All those in favor of tabling the minutes till the next meeting, say aye.
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 Okay, it's unanimous. Commissioner Randall, Happy New Year and welcome back to the cab. We haven't seen you for a long time and we look forward to your report. You're up.
Happy New Year. Somebody's got some audio coming back. I don't know if everybody wants to check their sound for meeting. Thanks, Craig. I think that might have been you. So yes, it has been a long time. We had a lot of non-meetings through the cab, and when the cab met, I wasn't one of the board members. So this is my first time back for a long time.
Welcome back, Jeff.
Thank you. Yeah, it's been really an eventful year, and I think it's been really challenging for staff and for Kevin. I think it speaks well of the organization, how well the staff has maintained services that our residents rely upon, as well as investigating new things like the meters and the broadband opportunities and this on-bill financing program that we hope to launch this year, and all the other things that PUDs that have been around for decades aren't necessarily doing in the midst of a pandemic. So it's been really challenging. And we had challenges with staffing before the pandemic. All utilities did. And probably the hardest area to recruit, the most competitive area, was linemen. And the linemen are kind of the tip of the spear in terms of the electric side of the organization for keeping things up and running. And then with the pandemic, late or early fall, late summer, we learned about the governor's proclamation on COVID and discussed how to best deal with that, and looked at options, and in the end authorized Manager Kevin Street to pursue the COVID and vaccination policies that he thought best address the governor's proclamation and the Department of Transportation's communication to us about what was expected, that all employees or contractors that we would have working with them in the right of way would be vaccinated or otherwise comply with the governor's very limited exceptions to the vaccination policy, which did not include things like testing in lieu of vaccination. So we had to deal with that this fall, and really, I think, and Kevin can speak more to that, but the commissioners, our role is to provide direction and not to micromanage how things are implemented. And since then, we have had to change the contractor who provides lineman services as backup to our employees. We lost, is my understanding, 2 of our employees who could not comply with the vaccination policy and who we could not accommodate, basically because they worked with other people. They could not work alone. And apparently, and I don't get reports on every employee because it's not my business. That's personnel matters are largely confidential. But my understanding is we may have more than one employee who was able to be accommodated and is able to work by themselves. But the linemen don't fall into that category. So we lost 2 linemen. And my understanding now is that we're basically, instead of 2 4-person crews, we've got 1 4-person crew and then 2 additional people. And if Kevin wants to, he can elaborate on that. And we've had to get a new contract lineman business working for us, and that's Palouse out of Eastern Washington, out of Quincy. And they have been helping us in the nick of time deal with these series of really challenging storms which we've had. And I think on top of things, Kevin could probably say more about this. I think this winter is proving to be a more challenging storm season than probably on average. And it seems like we're getting higher winds. We've had snow. Sometimes we've got both coming at the same time. So if a pandemic isn't enough, we've got that. And on top of the already challenging hiring people that existed before the pandemic, then we had the governor's order and so forth. So I think in light of all that, our staff is doing amazing work. And speaking for myself, we had an all hands meeting with the staff a few weeks ago. And I wanted to recognize how hard everybody had worked, how how they all pull together, how challenging this situation is regarding the pandemic, something that is brought on by outside forces and outside rules that we're doing our best to comply with, how well they've done. And I hope this year that we can back off a little bit on the pedal of let's get this new thing done, let's get that new thing done, that maybe we can back off just a little bit so we can be a little kinder to our staff and really recognize the hard work they've done. And we don't need to pile on more on them other than is necessary. But with that, we will continue with the broadband initiative because there is money out there. We've done the planning. We're well situated to go after grants, and staff will continue to do that. We have somewhere in the process, we've gotten approved for, we're in the process of getting approval for $5 million for this on-bill financing program, which really follows what Apalco has done and other co-ops like Apalco, where it's basically acts like a revolving loan fund. And we have a 20-year loan at 0 interest rates, and we have pretty broad ability to define what kinds of uses our customers can apply for a loan from us that will result in some sort of energy efficiency or other customer benefit programs, like things that promote electric vehicles or renewable energy or possibly resiliency like backup batteries. I think there's a broad category of things that people can use the money for. And I think there probably is room for the CAB to weigh in on something like that. So what kinds of programs do we think would be beneficial? What kinds of education and outreach efforts could be done? So the idea behind that is that we've got this money for 20 years, and as people borrow it, then that we'll set up a repayment program that will be added to their monthly electric bill. And if we use all that money up before the 20 years is up, which we very well may if it's a popular program, we can apparently go get more money. We can apply for another loan, get more money, and eventually the customers will pay it back. So it shouldn't cost the PUD anything, and we can add to that loan amount a small administrative fee to cover staff costs and other administrative costs. But hopefully that will result in what's the equivalent of an interest rate or a fee of, say, less than 2% on the loan. So I'm excited about that. I was looking through our strategic plan, which we adopted recently, just to see what other kinds of things are in there that the CAB might be helpful with. And another thing we're going to be looking at, and we've already adopted it, but we're kind of, I think, going to take a second look at it, is the sewer rates. And we identified a number of different sewer classes that had different costs drivers. And Beckett Point came out to be more like $100 a month or higher to capture the cost of providing service to the Beckett Point sewer system or community septic system, whatever you want to call it, compared to the Collow Point system, which is the least expensive. Then you've got some others that are in the middle. So the commissioners adopted a sewer rate schedule that categorized different customers into different rate classes, because we could identify that each one had different costs and were significantly different. But the Beckett Point folks, and Ken Collins participated in this meeting, so I don't know how it went, are concerned about the dramatic increase, and they're going from something like $30 a month to eventually over $100 a month to cover the cost of their system. And they're questioning that and wondering if they can do things to reduce the expense, and maybe Kevin can weigh in on how that meeting went. So I don't know if there's a role for the CAB or not in providing some more feedback on whether we should go to the postage stamp rate, where every sewer customer that the PUD serves has the same rate, or if it is more transparent, and that's one of the things that's in our strategic plan, if it is more transparent, to categorize them in their own rate classes, because they do have different rate drivers. So that was another one I looked at. In the area of meters, I think we've kind of done what we need to do to make the decision on meters, and Kevin can probably talk more about that too. And I think you guys got an update on that we're going to be going out to bid on that, or we're in that process now. But there's probably a role for the CAB in terms of the meters, in terms of how we communicate to the public what the possible benefits of the new advanced metering is, or perhaps some of the options we should be looking at, or, you know, maybe getting a report from staff, because these meters have tremendous capabilities of data gathering, which then can lead to things like how we implement the rates. And across the utility industry, there's a lot of questions about things like, if we're going to replace gasoline with electricity with electric vehicles, and we're going to be adding a lot of load, and we're going to try and get propane, and we don't have natural gas here, but if we're going to try and get fossil fuels off the grid, we're going to add electric loads. To what extent do we start getting concerned about not being able to meet our load? And should we be looking at a rate structure then that tries to get people to kind of shave their peaks, to use discretionary electricity loads at times when we have lower peak loads, and through such things as time of use rates. And other utilities are looking at like demand charges too, which we at the last rate process decided we didn't want to look at for residential customers yet. And that's basically, are you using a lot of energy at some times compared to your neighbors, which could be not just charging people based on how much electricity they use or the quantity in terms of kilowatt hours, but also how their peaks were. And we decided not to add that level of complexity. So those are just some ideas I had in looking at the strategic plan and what we're going to be looking at next year. But I'm very interested in hearing what the CAB thinks they would like to talk about. And we are absolutely looking at when we can have a joint meeting with the commissioners to kind of have some back and forth on these or other issues that you're thinking of. So I think I'll just stop there, and I'll be happy to respond to questions and go wherever you folks would like to go.
So it's just open forum here?
I think it's open forum, unless maybe I can go to Kevin first. Kevin, do you want to add or amend or do anything else with what I brought up? Do you have anything to add to what I brought up?
I could add a little bit, but if everyone just wants to throw out their questions to you, Jeff, that may be the easiest for now.
Yeah, so I think as
Excuse
far
me
as
just a
open,
minute. Craig, excuse me just a minute. If we can get people to raise their hands, because if everybody's just throwing out their questions, we're going to be talking over the top of one another. So I'll go ahead and call on you right now, Craig, but anybody else who wants to speak, please raise your hand.
and I'll just say in terms of open floor, I think, yeah, ideas for joint discussions or just questions. Absolutely. Go ahead.
Well, I'm not sure that you've really utilized the CAB that much, especially the last year. Of course, COVID kind of messed things up, but maybe give us some direction on what you want us to do. I would certainly say that probably broadband is something, but what part of it, I don't know. You just need to give us, something to do, I guess, is what I'm saying. Other than that, I mean, the meter thing has pretty much been worked out. So, I mean, you guys are the ones that created the CAB, and you created it, I think, to be a sort of an interface with the public. And you just need to decide how you want to use it.
Those
Thank
are all
you.
good points. Yeah, those are all good points. I don't disagree with you, Craig. I think a lot has been accomplished by the CAB if we kind of look back in time, from developing the low income assistance program to working through what was a lot of really complicated issues with the metering question and heartfelt public concern by some folks. The broadband question is an interesting one, because it seems like what's happening there is we're going after grants. Staff is really trying to look at what parts of the county seem to best fit the criteria that each grant is aimed at in terms of served, underserved, and so forth. And I think they're trying to put together areas that make the most sense. And I think they're probably also looking at areas of how can this also help our SCADA system, perhaps. So they're looking at multiple things at the same time. So I don't know if in that process there's really a role for CAB, but I suspect, as you said, what are we looking for CAB to do? We're looking for CAB to help us with things that relate more to the public. So I think as we're talking about how this new broadband program will likely interface with the public, you know, in terms of, okay, when the PUD rolls out a program and when they reach out to the public and they say what things will cost and they say how you're going to get hooked up and they say what you're going to get, how's that all going to work? You know, so I think perhaps when staff is getting ready to roll that out, probably running that by CAB would be a really good exercise of having yourselves help them think about the questions that they're going to be having to answer and how that's all going to work. I think that would be really good. And there's probably good examples from other PUDs about, like for Grant County and other places, how they're doing that. But I think having it work for us would be a good idea. I think that on-bill program would be really good to have you guys dive into that. And again, hear from staff and perhaps take some time and look at Opalco and how they've utilized their program and basically seeing what do we want to get from it? Do we think the money will go fast? What if the money goes fast? Do we want to do another round? What should the goals be? I think that's all good stuff. And something else I didn't really talk about was electric vehicle promotion. And that's another area where Opalco has done a few things that are kind of interesting. To what extent do we want to get into that? But I think, Craig, in answer to your question, I think we can really talk more about a lot of those ideas and what the other commissioners think in the joint meeting when we make that happen. So I'll just stop there.
Seb, you've got your hand up.
I do. Yeah, it's an extraordinarily bad time for the PUD to have loss of key employees. My key question about that whole thing is, it's puzzling and troubling to me that we are the only public utility district in the state of Washington that felt it necessary to comply with the governor's mandate. Kevin, that's true, isn't it? Why are we the only ones? Maybe that's a question I should ask Kevin directly, but Jeff, did you know that we're the only ones?
Well, I know that now, at least I believe that's true. And what I've heard is that other organizations, and I've also asked the question about, hey, how's the city dealing with this? And I don't know to what extent they interface with the Department of Transportation. I know they have Simsway going through town, and the county, you know, certainly has more of a possibility of interfacing with the Department of Transportation. And what I've just informally heard back is their concern that they can't get to compliance and that they might lose too many key personnel. And that's all I've heard. I haven't heard anything more in terms of how they're communicating with the state, if they asked for exceptions, or if they're just kind of like being quiet, waiting to see if there's going to be any enforcement. And I think from our end, we talked about it, and we talked about the policy. We talked with our legal counsel. We talked to Kevin. We fully tried to understand what the requirement was. And I think to Kevin's benefit, I think Kevin, if we assign him to do something or somebody else does, in this case, the state of Washington says, you shall do this, I think Kevin tries to get it done. And I think at that time, I think this is fair to say, I think we had roughly 10 employees or so who were not, you know, and we've been trying to get folks vaccinated for a while, because ever since COVID started, it was something that all employers are hearing from the health officials. This is something you should do. So I think we've been communicating with our staff all along about the benefits and opportunities, and trying to provide incentives that if you get a vaccine and you have a reaction for a few days, that you can have time off, that sort of thing. We've tried to encourage and provide information. But I think it came down to where Kevin said in one meeting, we had something like around 10 employees who were really concerned or were resisting or questioning getting the vaccination. And, you know, maybe he wants to explain more of what he thought, but he felt like we should try to comply. And the board took a vote 2-1, authorizing the manager to pursue the vaccination policy he thought best.
Yeah.
And he basically implemented a vaccination requirement with allowed exceptions for medical or religious reasons. But if you can grant, if somebody qualifies for one of those exceptions, then the question is, can you accommodate them? And that's very much like the kind of American Disabilities Act sort of thing, or an employee who has a disability or needs an accommodation. Can they be accommodated and still do the work? And so we did it that way, I think, without looking over our shoulders and saying, gee, what's everybody else doing? We did what we thought was the right thing to do. And what other organizations do is what other organizations do. And I'm the commissioner for the Jefferson PUD. I'm not the commissioner for any other PUD. And I'm fully vaccinated. I've got a mom who's 84 years old who's fully vaccinated. Both of us have gotten our boosters. My son is vaccinated. He can't get his booster yet because he's under 16. And that's my personal approach on it. And I've got family, extended family, who are not vaccinated. And it's been really challenging that my mom's sister in Eastern Washington, refuses to get vaccinated, and we're not comfortable being around them. So I'm affected by this personally. And I totally hear the heartfelt concerns that people have who are not vaccinated, who don't want to get vaccinated. And as we've gone through this, since we've authorized Kevin to pursue the policy that he feels best, it's been hard, to hear that. And it's not comfortable saying that we're going to let somebody go who's been a lineman for us for 7 years. That's really uncomfortable. But at the same time, we're, as commissioners, we have to sift through information, and the meter one was a good example. We had a lot of different information we have to sift through. When it comes to rates, there's different things we have to sift through and decide what do we think is the best policy for the PUD, and the vaccine stuff is no different. We have to sift through the information and decide what do we believe and what do we want to do. So that's where we are. And my bottom line is, I've told people, and Kevin, I apologize for that phone ring and I'll shut it off in just a second, is, are we able to meet our service demands? Are we able to respond to outages? Are we able to meet our customer demands? And if we cannot, if we have a problem, that's one side of the equation, that if we are unable to do that, then I think we have to relook at our policy. And on the other side is, have conditions changed? Has the pandemic changed in such a way that the health professionals are saying that vaccinations are not the best and most important thing you can do, or the governor drops his proclamation? I think those would be conditions that, yes, we will look at altering our policy. So I hope, Seb, I've answered your question, and I don't know if Kevin.
Well, the first of several, but let me go on though, because Dan's got his hand up now, maybe for a while. I sympathize with the position that you were in at giving Kevin that authorization to do what he felt is right. And I know that Kevin feels that he did do what was right, but another member of this particular PUD board was a president of the organization of WAPUDA. So he surely knew what was going on. And if he didn't, there's a disconnect there. And I'm just shocked that's where we had to go with it, to be the only one in the state of Washington that actually had to let people go because of that.
Yeah, and I don't know if anybody else let any people go. I don't know what their policies are, but I think from my perspective, sometimes it makes a lot of sense to follow everybody else and do what they're doing. And sometimes if you're the one doing something different, you might be right. And I think I've told people this too. I think time will tell what is the best decision. And I think you just have to do what is best at the time. But I appreciate your perspective, Seb, and it's different.
Well, and then the fact that Kevin was able to tap dance his way into finding new subcontractors or other additional subcontractors, and then find Palouse Electric to come and help us in such a short time. That was an emergency use authorization. But to that point, Palouse is going to cost us a significant amount of money over what Titan would have cost us for the same thing. So in your fiduciary responsibility as one of the commissioners, I hope that you're looking very carefully at how you evaluate those particular contracts. Now, I know as an emergency use, Kevin did what he had to do, and that's great. And thank God those guys worked their butts off in the snow and the rain and the wind and kept the power on for most of us. But if we had a full contingency of crew and we had Titan still with us, it might not have lasted quite as long as it did for some people, particularly down the coil. But again, my sympathies go out to you. Let me wrap up with one other question, and then maybe we'll have more for later. But the other thing was, you started off talking about how you didn't want to overwhelm the staff with too much additional work. Well, we're a very small PUD with 19,500 customer bases or meter bases, whatever you want to call it. But now you're talking about, we have the broadband thing, we have the meter rollout, we have electric vehicle promotion, low income. I mean, my God, man, maybe we should just slow down a little bit and take one thing at a time. And like the thing with the broadband, that there's an immense amount of work figuring that out. We have no idea if it's going to pay for itself without a really solid business plan. Same thing with the so-called smart meters. We don't have a business plan to show that that's really going to pay off unless you consider what the industry tells you about how good they are and how long they last and how they're good for 30 years, when in fact they only guarantee them for one. So these are crazy stupid as far as I'm concerned. I don't see the payback. I don't. So I'm hoping somebody can sell me on that to convince me that maybe all these things are good ideas, and they are good ideas, but the implementation, the cost justification for it are things that as a consumer and an owner ratepayer of the utility, I'm very concerned about. And I know a lot of other people are as well. So anyway, I'll shut up now.
Yeah, thanks,
Thank
Seb.
you.
Those are all good thoughts. And I think on broadband, the reason why we're trying to go as fast as we are is we realize that
There's funding available.
there's funding. And as you know, when you're in a competitive environment where there's going to be increasing demand, and when you're going after something, probably the guys who are ready first are going to get, the best bites of the apple. So I think we're being aggressive to go after broadband because we know it's a need. The money's there. We're well situated. So I don't see us really slowing down on that. And on the meter thing, I think a lot of what's driving that is our existing system is just falling apart.
Yeah, I agree.
And we flat out have to be able to bill people. We have to get accurate reads, and we have to have the money coming in. And it's literally like the ship is sinking underneath us, the meter part of it, and we've got to get it replaced. And that's the message I've heard from Kevin is, you make some good points that there is a risk in changing technology and what's the cost going to be. And we've talked about that a lot. I think we've done the best we can to minimize that risk, but we're literally losing the boat underneath us, and we need a new boat. We need a new metering system. So I think we've done the best we can at that point.
I think I'd really like to see a very, very solid contract with penalties to the provider if they don't perform as advised.
Yeah, that's a good suggestion.
And if we don't have that, we got nothing.
Well, and I think too, anytime you're dealing with technology, you can have somebody come in and provide you something, but when do they get their final payment? Does the dang thing really work? And I think there's probably lots of lessons to be learned there in terms of when we do sign the contract and that the pace at which they're installed, that all these different things that we don't need, as you said, we don't need more crises. When we do this meter thing, if we can avoid having a crisis with it, if we can avoid it not working, or if we can hold the feet to the fire of whichever contractor or what's that called, vendor that provides us the equipment and the software, that the stuff works like it's supposed to, and that they follow through on the implementation and help us as smoothly as possible make it happen. Those are all good points.
Yeah, just one further point, and this is from the experience that we had 5 years ago about this thing. We found out that Benton County put in a whole new AMI metering system, and they all failed. So the supplier provided them with a whole new replacement of all the meters, only at half price. Is that a great deal for the ratepayer owners of that utility? I don't think so. Why didn't they provide them for free if they had failed? So that's an example of the kind of thing I hope that we can avoid.
I concur.
Again, I'll shut up now.
I totally concur. And they were kind of an early adopter, is my understanding. And I tried to find out a little bit more about their experience, and they were pretty clammy about it. They didn't want to share a whole lot. So we don't, and I think Benton has a bigger budget than us. I think they've got more resources, and we can't afford that kind of stuff. So you're absolutely right.
That explains my adamance about this sort of thing, is that we cannot. So thank you. Okay, done.
Thanks.
My 3
Thanks,
minutes
Seth.
are up.
Yeah. Dan, are you still there?
Yeah, I didn't nod off or anything.
I didn't see that.
I'm really grievously concerned about the whole broadband deal. For one, I see us taking a bunch of grants, which just means we're taking it out of my pocket and putting it in the hands of the PUD after it's been cycled through the federal government. So I think we need to try and avoid that. I'm not sure that there's going to be viability about broadband when this is all done. I checked with Starlink the other day. That's Jeff Bezos's deal, or Elon Musk's deal. And they're going to be up and running in this area in the middle of this year. And I don't see us even knowing what we're doing by that length of time. So if we get a bunch of grants and throw a bunch of money at it and maybe even hire some staff to go out and put it in people's houses, we may be taking a giant leap backwards. Plus, I'm not sure we know what costs are. I mean, it's just a huge, big rabbit hole. So you're going to find me on the other side of that fence every chance I get. That's just the way it's going to be. I think this is a deal that we really don't want to pursue too hard. And I think we've already pursued it way too hard. And I wasn't as against it before as I am now because the service is going to be available. Now, where I live, it's a virtual impossibility that I'll ever have it. But having said that, I don't want to see us spending a bunch of money that goes nowhere. And it looks like that's what we're in line to do.
So your question's a good one. And the question I would phrase it as, let's say we go after this, we get a lot of grants, we have some loans, we invest a bunch in fiber to the home, and people don't want it because whatever number we have to charge to recapture our costs and have a viable program, somebody like Starlink can provide it cheaper, faster, better, whatever. Would we put all this stuff out there and then basically have a bunch of stranded assets that we can't get our money back on? And so let me tell you why I don't think that's going to happen. Wapuda had Starlink gave us a presentation. And what I've seen is that they have a significant difference in what they market to the public versus what they will tell you is real. And I asked the presenter several questions to try and get through the smoke of what's real versus, what they can really offer versus what they're claiming to the public or implying that they're offering. And what they've said
is— Are you talking about price or service now?
Well, it's both. It's both. So price and what they can actually provide. So they gave us a big presentation on how many satellites they're shooting up every month and blah, 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 and what it's all going to do. But the bottom line that I wanted to know is, who are you going to be able to serve? Let's say, this is a great price, a great product. Who are you going to be able to serve? And they flat out admitted that if you can run fiber to the home, that there's no way Starlink can compete with that. That who Starlink is for those 1Z, 2Z, 3Z, 4Z, 5Z houses that are just too far away for us to run fiber to. They're too off the end of the road. We're just not going to do it. They're too distant. Those are the people that Starlink will serve. They will not have enough satellites and enough bandwidth to serve everybody. And they basically said, if you can run a terrestrial solution, if you can run fiber to the home, that's what you should do. And that's what your customer can sign up for, because we cannot launch enough satellites and we do not have the bandwidth to provide everybody Starlink. So they just clearly said it. We're for the people who cannot be served with fiber terrestrially. They're too far away. And so how you define that is kind of up to staff. Once the density is no longer so many houses per so many lineal feet on the road, we're not going to go there because we just can't do it. I think those are legitimate Starlink people. And I don't know, Kevin, do you have anything to add to that? You might be muted. There you go.
I know Starlink is, at least today, kind of struggling in our area to complete the connections they've already, people have signed up for. They're, and this may have changed. Last time I checked, they only had 1 million connections from the FCC. They can't connect any more than that, and then they're done. So at least for today.
And I think on the flip side of that, okay, there's Starlink. Well, what about the other guys? What about CenturyLink and Wave? And if we build out our infrastructure, are they then going to build out their own and do it for less? And we're, going to have stranded assets again. Answer is they're not doing anything. They have served what they're going to serve, and they're actually looking to get out of our county. They're looking to sell their assets in rural counties like us. So the bottom line I've seen is the money's there. The existing service providers are not going to expand or improve their service. The Starlinks of the world are super cool, but from satellites, you can only do so much. And what the Starlink folks said is, we think fiber on the ground is awesome. Do it. We'll pick up the edges where you can't get to. So I think Starlink plus the PUD in Jefferson County is the answer. Hopefully Starlink can follow through and do their thing. But it's going to take us time. It's going to take us years. And what we heard originally was we need 2,000 customers to roughly break even. And I suspect that's what staff's going for right now. And then a lot of the, the highest density areas, we're not applying for in the grants, Port Townsend and places like that, because we don't score as well as Quilcene and other places. So we're going for the hardest to serve, most remote areas because we can get money first. But then I was looking at it's NTIA, I can't remember what agency that is, National Transportation, something other infrastructure, God knows who they are, actor, if that's the bill, how it defined unserved and underserved. And it defined underserved as 45 up or something up and something down. And like my speed with Wave, with the best service they can provide in my area, it met the download speed, but it didn't meet the underserved upload speed for the federal government. So I don't know. I'm hoping that in places where we've got, somewhat decent service in the county, but that the PUD fiber could be better and could be cheaper, that we can also down the road get some grant funding there too, so that we have enough customers overall so we can have a viable system. And once we roll it out, it's not just the PUD that would be a service provider, Wave or anybody else, everybody else who wants to have their own ISP, so we can have competition and have choice. But I don't think we will end up with stranded assets. But your question of can we get enough customers and how are we going to administrate it and what'll the cost be? Those are still really good questions. I think it won't be easy. It'll be
So
challenging.
you really,
I think we need it.
you really have no idea what the cost of installation and the cost of use is going to be?
That's not for me to answer. I don't know. That's really a staff question. So I'll turn that one over to staff.
So somebody must have some clue.
I think we're aiming at the night, it's going back to the plans that have been provided by our broadband contractors. I think they were saying it's, what you can get people to buy and what you could make the thing sustainable. It's in the like $90 to $100 a month range. I don't know, Kevin, if you want to jump in with.
So for us to apply and get a grant, we have to have engineers' estimates for what it costs to build out in that area. So those are a known number, and that's the dollars we get. For example, the NTIA grant that we applied for, the federal gave us, or we're hoping the federal gives us the grant and the state does a matching. Now the PUD has some staff time and some other costs, but it's very minimal. The total grant build out is paid by us. I understand what you're saying, that it's taking it from our pockets, giving it to the feds and then back to us. But if we don't apply for the money, somebody else will. So we're hoping most of these areas we build out for free. And then right now, we're talking on what it would cost. We think initially our rates would be $60 for 100 up, 100 down, plus taxes. You know, that may go up a bit. That was set about a year and a half ago. So, you know,
So that's per
inflation-
month, Kevin, or is that the
Yes.
install?
No, that's per month. The grants are to the home. So it includes equipment at the home.
Okay.
So if you happen to be in a grant area, it is a very good deal.
And Dan, you might be in a grant area.
I might be.
I just wanted to add that. Yep. We can check
But
in with you
nobody
after the
knows.
fact. But no, I think you are, but we can check in after the fact. I can confirm.
Okay, are we good now, Dan?
Yeah,
Okay. I see Bob McCauley has his hand up. Bob?
Yeah, I'm very new. Thanks. I'm very new to this whole process. And I'm just trying to understand on this broadband idea. Has the board made a decision on whether we're going to provide wholesale service, retail service, or a combination of both?
So in answer to your question, we will have an open access network. So basically, we will make it open to other internet service providers. In addition to that, the state law was changed last year, which now allows us, we used to be prohibited from providing retail service, from being an internet service provider. State law prevented us from doing that. That law changed last year. And once it changed, our broadband consultants recommended that we really consider being an ISP, because what they found is that when a rural area like that, even urban areas, what they found is the big ISPs, the Waves and the CenturyLinks of the world, they will not go on a public access network because they don't want it to succeed. This is me speaking. You know, this is my conclusion from what I've heard. And they basically wait for it to fail and then they buy it up cheap. And I'm hoping that's going to change. And what our consultant said is that we're the only country in the world where that doesn't happen. In Europe and everywhere else, ISPs, you know, the publics build out the infrastructure, they build out the fiber, and then the private ISPs get on it and they compete, and that's how it works. In America, for whatever reason, they've kind of tried to refuse to do it. So I'm hoping that with this massive influx of money all around the country, that the public ISPs will start to see that it is in their interest to jump on these publicly provided fiber networks. So basically, by choosing to be our own ISP, which we voted to do, we have applied with the state of Washington to go through all those things to be an ISP. We're providing at least one. There will be at least one ISP on our network. We want more than one, but we're the backup, and we'll be a choice that the public can make.
Craig? You had your hand up?
Yeah, so, you know, I kind of like to second what Seb said and also Dan. You know, none of these grants are really truly free. There's always strings attached, there's costs. And that grant money, it sounds like you don't even have enough anyway. You got to go get other grants. So I'm just, you know, I'm trying to put out a word of caution here, because we could rush into something and then get stuck in a situation where now, where do you get the money? You got to go to the ratepayers for the electrical, the water, and the other things to subsidize this broadband. So it's a big concern I have. Actually, you know, we were sold on the PUD buying the electrical system, and some of the premises that they sold us didn't really come true. First off, it was supposed to be a lot less money, like 40 million, and it ended up being over 100 million. You know, if that isn't something significant, I don't know what is. So I know that Jeff is really selling this broadband big time, and it's a visionary thing. And I'm not saying it's not something that we shouldn't look into, but we just have to be cautious. So thank you.
Yeah, I don't know what to add to that. I think I think you're right. They, as far as I can see, what staff is doing is they're going after kind of segmented plans or phases for what area can they build out. And as Kevin said, to be competitive, you have to be able to provide a cost estimate for what you can build it for. So they're basically segmenting the county up, going in for phased proposals for construction and so forth. One thing I do want to correct is that the electric and the water and the sewer side are not subsidizing the broadband side, other than the electric side, and SCADA has been our broadband program up until now. So as I see what's going to happen is it's going to eventually spin out on its own and being its own division. And what the commissioners have done is we have dedicated the equivalent of the property tax revenue as a basis for broadband for now, until it gets up to the point where it can sustain itself. And the property taxes for years went to the water side. So that that division
Well,
benefited from property taxes for decades.
so what I'm cautioning is you're making some assumptions here. And if your assumptions don't hold true, someone is going to have to pay. And the only thing you can do is dip into the existing customer and actually subsidize the broadband. So that's something that you better be careful of.
Well, I think the one advantage we have is PUDs getting into the broadband business is not a new thing. There have been other PUDs that have been doing it for a long time. And I think the big barrier for us was just the cost, at roughly $90 million was the estimate. We just couldn't see doing it. And other PUDs have done it. Grant County invested approximately $200 million in their system, and they're there. They've built it all out. They chose to do that. They had hydro revenues that they could dedicate to that. And for us, I think with both the retail prohibition and with the cost being very expensive, we just didn't, we were interested, but we couldn't commit to it. But now with the retail prohibition lifted and money coming to cover the cost, I think we are being aggressive in going after it, but I think we're trying to do it in a responsible manner.
Dan, your hand is still up. Is that a second time up, or you just didn't get it down yet?
No, it's re-up. So my further concern is that once we get all this built, we still have to staff it and we still have to maintain it. And it looks to me like that's going to be placed on the then current ratepayers of that. I'm not at all sure that you can take, I'm not at all sure you can't, but that you can take electric and water money and put it toward broadband. I don't know that that's a statute possibility. I rather think it isn't, but I don't know that. So once you get the services in place, you got to be able to maintain it both with staff and maintain the infrastructure. And I'm really grievously concerned that you go sucking up a bunch of grant money and then 5 years, 10 years from now, technology changes, things degrade, and here we are with a bucket full of stuff we can't use. I have long been an advocate of changing the name of Jefferson County to Grant, and then the county animal could be the sponge. But that name's already taken. That's all I got.
I don't quite get the grant and the sponge, unless grants are sucking up other people's money. Maybe that's what you're talking about. Yeah, I don't have anything to add other than I think that's where, if the consultants were right in their numbers, we're going to ultimately need 2,000 or more fiber customers. But I'll tell you what, I'm a Wave customer, and every 3 months, I swear to God, they are sending a bill that's jumped $50 a month for no apparent reason. And then you got to go in and you have to go into their office to negotiate a discount where you try to get it back to closer to $100. And that's all I have now is just the best speed internet service I can get through them. I don't have any cable. I don't have anything else. So if we can offer it, as Kevin said, at $60 plus whatever add-ons for if there's an ISP that they have a fee, or if there's any equipment fees where they've got to pay for a modem or something. If we can offer it at anything around $90 or less, I think we're going to be having people banging down our doors for 100 up, 100 down. I don't think we're going to have a problem with 2,000 customers minimum, but and it'll be the same infrastructure like everything else. We have to maintain our electric lines. We have to maintain our water lines. We'll have to collect enough to maintain our iFiber network.
Different people though.
Right. It's a different team. And there is, as part of Kevin's plan, he is showing now the staffing needs for how many people we're going to have to hire to bring that on, and how the organization is going to change a little bit. And you're right. It won't be subsidized by the other utilities. It'll have to live on its own. And that's why we've done all this work we've done so far to develop the business plans and staff plans. And that's why we're in a position to do what we're doing today.
So currently, you're listening to me through Verizon, and they charge me about 60, I think it's $68 a month plus taxes for their service at 4G, which at some point they shuttered me a little. And it's a $400 bill to get the infrastructure within my house.
And what are you getting up and down out of that curiosity?
I don't know. I don't have any way to meter that, but it's pretty damn fast most of the time. Till like now, it's shuttered now, and it's still working for video.
Yeah.
You're a little bit, your sound is a little bit behind your actual picture.
You might just do an up and down speed test just for fun to see what you got. But again, what we're going to offer is 100 up, 100 down. And in my house, I've got, my kid is downstairs now because he's home from school today. Didn't know, his stomach was a little upset, streaming something undoubtedly. And I'm doing this thing. And the question is, if you can get by with what you've got and pay $60 a month, great. And if the PUD thing, by the time all the taxes and everything is said and done on it, let's say it's $75 a month or $80 a month and offers better, but you don't need it, maybe you won't sign up for it.
Well, I'm not talking about just me though. I'm talking about the rural customer in general.
I'm going to have to move the meeting on here because it's getting close to 3 o'clock and we still have some other issues to cover. If you want to discuss this further with Jeff, I would recommend that you give him a phone call and talk to him about it a little bit more.
Absolutely. Reach out to me offline and I'm happy to talk more. Thanks, Jessica.
Thank you. So this is going to bring us to the general manager's report. Kevin, you're up.
And a lot of what I talked about has been talked about, so I'm going to keep this very, very short. So far, we have 2 candidates that have applied for the cab. Those names will be brought forward on the 18th. On the 18th, we will also bring forward the new sewer rates. On a week from tomorrow, next Tuesday, we will talk about meters, and we will also talk about idle services. The very last thing that I'll mention is the outages we had in the coil. Boy, it was, with the snow and everything, it was just total devastation. We had so many trees down and we just couldn't get to them. I know there's been some questions, well, whether we had 10 crews there, could we have got it done faster? Probably not in this case. Part of the driving force here was literally getting to the places where the problems were. Getting the plows in, getting the trees cut down. We do believe that there will be a FEMA declaration. We're hoping it goes through the feds as a FEMA declaration. And 2 reasons. We want to recoup our costs spent at the outage. The feds will go 75%. Then the state usually pitch in 12.5%. But we're also going to go the next step, and a lot of times FEMA will have a provision that if I'm going to use the word harden in some of these areas where we've had multiple outages down on the coil, versus pay us to put it up, they will pay us to take a long-term approach. So we are going to look at some options there for hardening the areas down on the coil, because we've really had some challenges down there. And with that, Jessica, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Okay, does anybody have any questions for Kevin? Kevin, I think they exhausted their questions with Jeff.
And that's great.
So, with no questions for Kevin, thank you for your report, Kevin. We'll move on to CAB business, item 8.1, discussion regarding upcoming joint BOC CAB meeting. And I will lead this off with making the suggestion that we try to set that meeting up for what would be our normal CAB meeting in February, which is February 14th. And if we could reach an agreement here that we would like to suggest that to the board for 2 o'clock on February 14th, that's a Monday. And that way it's a meeting that staff would already be prepared for, and it wouldn't it wouldn't try to bump another meeting, and it would be more likely, I would think, that we'd be able to do that and have all of the commissioners present. And depending on what their schedules are, I don't know if they are yet, but I would propose proposing that to the Board of Commissioners at their next meeting, and see if that will, if they can accommodate us with that. Does anybody else have any thoughts or ideas on that?
I'd move that motion.
No, real quick,
Yes.
Jessica, it's very difficult to schedule all 3 commissioners. Would it be possible for, we will send out an email tomorrow morning to all 3 commissioners to see if we can get it scheduled. So that way, and usually we get a response back, by the end of the day. But before you guys would vote or do anything, I would like to reach out to the commissioners and just make sure February 14th at 2 o'clock they're available.
Okay, I think that would be fine. And I don't think this is really something that we need to vote on. I just was trying to get kind of a general consensus if everybody thought that that was a good idea, that we try and hold it on the day that we would normally be having our CAB meeting. And I understand, I listen to the commissioner reports usually, and yeah, it's like herding cats.
I can't think
Kevin,
of a more appropriate day.
That day works for me, Kevin.
Okay, well, if you'll go ahead and send something out and get back to us tomorrow or the next day, then I can send something out to the CAB and let them know if that date works. And if not, if there are some alternate dates that you might put forth to us. And I think a lot of the discussion that we've had with the good discussion that we've had with Commissioner Randall today is really reflective of some of the things that we will be covering with all 3 commissioners. And I look forward to doing that. And I would strongly recommend to the CAB to, between now and when we do have the joint meeting, to think about different items that you may want to discuss, and different things that you feel like where the CAB can be a real benefit to the PUD and the commissioners and staff, of course. Is there any other further discussion on this? I'm looking, okay. I need to get to my page where I can see if their hands are up or not. Okay. Well, moving to the CAB open forum, I have one item I want to address here. And it's with respect to a comment that Craig Durgan made in response to an article that was in on an online newspaper with respect to the mandate that the PUD has put in place for vaccinations. And the comment reads as follows. I am a member of the Citizen Advisory Board for the PUD. We were never consulted regarding the change in policy. In fact, our comments were essentially blocked. If I had been asked, I would have opposed it. This is bad policy. I have to question Kevin Street's decision-making process as well as that of Commissioners Randall and Collins. Now, this bothered me because if you're representing yourself as a member of the Citizen Advisory Board, that's fine. You need to speak for yourself and you need to make sure it's according to, and I'm looking at resolution 2018-0-015. And it says, I'm trying to find the exact. Okay, under 6, manner of communication, 6C. When expressing their views regarding district business in any venue, CAB members shall make it clear that such views are personal and not those of the CAB or the district. And I know that Craig specified that he is a member of the CAB, but he said here, in fact, our comments were essentially blocked. And I have problems with that because you're using the plural our. And the other problem is it's blatantly untrue. You, Craig, and both Seb spoke at the October 4th Board of Commissioners meeting. You had your 3 minutes that you could speak to this. You've spoken at other meetings regarding this as well. Putting this out there in a public forum, saying that the Citizen Advisory Board had their comments essentially blocked is not a good reflection on the CAB or the board or staff. And I was just really disappointed to see this because, as I said, in fact, you have had an opportunity to speak. The fact that your stand on this vaccine policy differs from what the PUD chose to do does not mean you did not get to speak or that your comments were blocked. And I really hope not to see anything like this again. And if anybody has any further comments, please let me know. Well, I can't see hands up here. I'm having problems with my screen. Does anybody have their hands up?
No hands up that I can see.
Okay. Very good then. It is an open forum for the CAB. Does anybody have anything they wish to discuss? Do you see anybody, Will? I'm really having problems with my screen here.
I don't see any hand raised, but I do see
Okay.
people.
The only other thing I would like to bring up is at our last board meeting, you likely remember that we participated in a roundtable with Jean Hall. She gave us a report on the CETA CIEIP Public Input Survey. That's the Clean Energy Transformation Act and the Clean Energy Implementation Plan. And at the following meeting at the Board of Commissioners, Jean gave that same presentation and went to do a roundtable with them. And the board was hard pressed to come up with anything. I think it was Jeff who came up with reaching out maybe to food banks as well. So they were really pleased with the work that we did in our roundtable. And as I said, they just had one other thing to add to it. So I just want to thank everybody for having participated so fully in that. And for making this a little easier on staff and on the Board of Commissioners. And that is all I have. And Will, if you're not seeing anybody else there, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Okay, that sounds like Dan Taylor moves
And
to
second,
adjourn. Seconded, was that you, Craig?
Nope, it's
no, it's
Bob.
Bob.
Bob, okay, thank you, Bob. Okay, it's been moved and seconded to adjourn this meeting. All those in favor say aye.
All right,
Aye, goodbye.
Jessica, can you stay on for a sec?
Sure I can, and it's 3:11. Oh, you know, you might have to call me direct because.
That's
Will
fine.
will-
What's your number? What's your number?
360-385-1786.
Okay.
Hey, say hi to Terry for me.